Very professional. Headbutting the microphone to start the stream? Sure. We can do that. And good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well today, as well as can be. Inspecting the grass from the correct side. Unless you're a necromancer or a lich, then, you know, a different type of grass inspection. Good morning, Lord Volpex. Hope you're doing well. Busy clicking. I'm setting up stuff. Which for some reason you can't save as defaults. I think we'll move this down a little bit. There. Okay, I think we are there. And we are there. Cool. Good morning, Anthony. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, Kandaria. Hope you're doing well as well. First of all, let's... Ow. Cut my nails. Oh, yes. It's the only time that I actually care that I've cut my nails. Okay. Let's just sort this camera out. That's a bit better. Cool. Yep. Every side, well, that is very true. Every day on the green side is good. Oh, yes, that's good. Right, so we're going to be doing 3 of those. And then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A bunch of shortish re-T-fosses. Then we're pretty much... What is today? Today is Tuesday. News to me. Welcome everybody, welcome. Oh wait, I almost forgot. I need to share copy. Right. My massive social media presence. Posted to the 3 people who follow me on Twitter and my Discord server. If you're not part of the Discord server, I would say it's probably a good thing to head over there. If you want to ask me any questions outside of stream, it's a good way of doing that. I do post notifications for videos. Sometimes, when I remember. And if you're a channel member or a Patreon subscriber, or whatever they're called, Patreon near, you get fancy colors. You can talk to other interesting people. Or me, you know. I'm not that interesting. I mostly lurk. Righty. Moustache fighting. Greetings, Asane, from Texas. Greetings from Portugal, or my bunker. Well, I say bunker. It's a basement. Yes, aggro is always, it's like a tank, but a squirrel tank. Busy just planning out the day. I think we should be able to do all of that. And green. And all of that. Maybe. We'll see how the voice goes. We have coffee, we have water, we have monster and monster. Should be enough for the stream. Yep. And what a big nose it is. Alright, I'm gonna head into the first story. Lock the rest of the voice. Well, first story. First chapter. Monsters fighting back. And then we'll head into the next chapter. But first, this chapter. If you do have any questions while I'm narrating, feel free to ask. I keep an eye on the chat. And I can pause and have a chit-chat with you guys. That's the good thing with the stream. The bad thing is I have to keep remembering that people are watching me. Alright. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Yuk Alta, Adventurer Level 7, Orc Nudavan. Many things were running through my mind as we continued our journey. The fragile sturdiness of life, the luck we've had in our most recent exploits, curiosity regarding Renv, and above all else Nick's ability to continually cast minor heal. Did casting it continually have any benefit over casting it as a once-off? Can everyone cast it continuously, or just Nick? He had seemed confused while we were discussing it, as if he was surprised by our surprise. Is it the basic nature of a spell to cast it continuously? If so, how do we not discover this sooner? I had been taught my healing spells by a specialist, who had studied under other specialists, who had learned the concept behind healing from I'd been taught my healing spells from a specialist, who had studied under other specialists, who had learned the concepts behind healing magic from ancient tomes. As far as I know, that's how every healer actually learns healing magic. Technically, you should be able to learn the spells on your own with a good deal of knowledge about anatomy and physiology, but I am unaware of anyone who has. This is likely due to the fact that trying to learn anatomy and physiology on your own is difficult to do legally, and most who attempt to do it illegally end up facing rather dire consequences. Well deserved, to be sure, but the end result is that they're not in a position to pass on any secrets they garner. I'd previously told Nick that he might be able to cast healing, just to see if he could. He seemed to have quite a bit of knowledge, so it wasn't a stretch to imagine he knew a thing or two about how a body functions. If he hadn't, I would have taken him... He seemed... If he hadn't... I lost my place. Ah, there we go. Excuse me. Hydration for the win. If he hadn't, I would have taken him to a specialist when our travels were somewhat less urgent. Nick has saved us the trip, but simultaneously opened a can of crawlers without a single fishing line in sight. And that's how I learned the spell, Nick explained to a shocked audience. Even Nash's mouth was agape, despite his attempts to remain stoic. The dwarf had asked plenty of questions, demonstrating an unfamiliarity with magic. Imlar looked paler and paler as the story had gone on, likely due to it describing his near demise. Imlar's a clever one. He'd quite easily put together the fact that if Nick hadn't been with us, he'd have died. Even if he'd ignored Ren's urgent situation with the bandits and continued on, his cart would have been right next to the explosion when it occurred. That kind of proximity would have allowed... That kind of proximity wouldn't have allowed for survival, even if he'd managed to avoid the shrapnel. Well, it's no wonder you lost consciousness, I said with a smile. You burned through all your reserves, and you were injured on top of that. It would have been odd if you hadn't passed out. Not quite as odd as continuously casting minor heal, though. Why is that odd? Why is that odd? Nick asked. Because it's like wind spear, I answered. It has a singular effect, or at least that's what I was led to believe. I don't even know what the benefit of holding the spell actually could do. Well, Nash interjected, Imlar through and through, one minor heal would have stopped the bleeding and maybe stabilized him, but it would have taken a bunch of castings to close the wound entirely, right? Good morning, Shadow. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, morning, day, night. Time unit. I turned to look at my brother, who'd once again found the stone I'd been blindly stumbling over, and gave him a silent nod. I dismissed anything odd about Imlar's wound due to the powerful nature of Nick's casting abilities. My mind had simply written it off as another instance of one of his spells being more powerful than it should be. Stupid of me, to be sure. Unlike some spells, healing spells don't get more potent the more magic you put into them. They have a set cost and a set result, which is why they are different types. Minor heal can stabilize someone that is mortally wounded for a time. Lesser heal will repair internal injuries and regenerate lost blood. Major heal can repair gratuitous injuries and broken bones, and greater heal can regenerate lost limbs. Each spell grants a brief amount of regeneration, and can also do what the previous levels can, but cost exponentially more magic to cast. As Nash pointed out, these spells have a compounding effect, meaning that, depending on the wound, casting minor heal 3 times can be more efficient than casting lesser heal once. But Nick had only cast minor heal that one time, so it shouldn't have been possible to completely heal Imlar. Therefore, the benefit to continuous casting, minor heal. Therefore. Fair enough. Stories and pie. Therefore, the benefit to continuous casting minor heal is that it has a similar effect to casting it multiple times. A blood-drenched piece of wood clattered to the floor of the cart, originating from one of Nick's wounds. This wasn't the first time it had happened, and Nick, having become used to this by now, casually picked it up and tossed it over the side of the cart. Suddenly a thought occurred to me. Nick was... Greetings, Mr. G63. Hope you're doing well. suddenly Nick, was that the last piece of shrapnel? I asked. Nick took a moment to consult Ten, and then nodded. I'd like to do an experiment, I smiled. Ask Ten if it's okay for me to cast a healing spell on you. Ten says that would be okay, Nick said after another moment. Good, I said. Lay Ronem to sack. I tried to hold the spell and was surprised when it actually worked. We watched the wound on Nick's hand close with a mixture of shock and glee. The glee was mostly from me. However, I also noticed that the spell was very quickly draining my magic reserve. I stopped the spell before I ran out of magic, but it was rather close call. I wouldn't want to be passing out like Nick had. Well, I'm glad that I can help, and that this content is enjoyable. Passing out like Nick had. I wouldn't want... Well, that answers several questions, I said, managing to stifle my excitement. First, you can continue the regenerative effect of Mana Heal by continuously casting it. Second, it casts magic for every second that you maintain the spell. Overall, it is more efficient than casting the spell multiple times. We'll need to have the official literature updated. For every second? Ash asked. Is it better than, lesser heal? Not quite. I suspect that if the lesser heal can also be continuously cast, the regenerative effect would be more efficient, I answered. I'd love to do more experimentation, but, it'll have to wait. It reminds me of a sci-fi story I read once. Well, it was a series. But like the first book is this dude gets hired onto a ship. He's never been on a ship, doesn't know anything about a ship. He's a planet person. So he keeps walking around going, well, why do you do it like that? And people go like, well, because we've always done it that way. It's like, oh, but couldn't you do it like that? Then they'll be like, we never really thought of that because, we've always done it this way. So it kind of reminds me of that. 8. Doing things because that's the way it's done, rather than, experimenting. Especially if there's thousands of years in this particular instance of this working a specific way. Wait. I know some pretty advanced healers, Renva added. If you'd like, I can bring this to their attention and make sure they credit you and Nick with the discovery. They would happily perform the experimentation that you want done. Nash gave me a knowing look, but I held up a hand to keep him from speaking for me. He knows how much I love scientific inquiry, and having others perform experiments in my stead would typically be a worst-case scenario for me. However, normally I'd rather do the experiments myself, but since we're speaking of magic that can save lives, I will gratefully accept your assistance, I replied. Really? Nash asked. Yes. We don't know if we will find any answers in Balasar, and we've given our oath to aid Nick in finding his way home, I said. It would be difficult to travel and research these phenomena simultaneously, at least while observing any semblance of scientific rigor. Since this may save lives, time is of the essence. Therefore, it only makes sense to have someone else begin research immediately. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. Begin research immediately. That's pretty mature of you, Nash said with a proud smirk. But if we do find answers in Balasar and wrap things up quickly, I can always join in on the research, I quickly added. Scientific competition is healthy after all. Yeah, that sounds more like you. We all had a good laugh, and when we were finished, Ren looked contemplative. You said you swore to help Nick find his way home. You said you swore to help Nick find his way home. I already gathered that he's not from around here. But how far away are we talking? He asked. I'm right here, you know, Nick chuckled. All right, apologies. Then I redirect the question at you, good sir. Ren bowed his head apologetically. That's right, Nick said. I'm from a different world, and there is no way to know how distant... And there is no way to know how distant that world is. I'm kind of assuming that it's an alternate reality kind of thing, but I guess it's possible that I was abducted from my world by aliens and brought here for some reason. Nick noted that we were all staring at him incredulously. Well, it was a thought, he said quietly. Someone from a different country might be Someone from a different country might have abducted you and brought you here, Ren asked. No, not that kind of alien, Nick quickly explained. Like a different species that has been like a different species that has the ability to travel through space. Space? Nash asked. Yeah, you know, above the sky, Nick asked in return. If you go up high enough, you end up in space. He's right, I confirmed. Not much is known about space, so I suppose it is possible. Magic is definitely the more likely possibility, though. Why is that? Nick answered. Because space is very, very big. The sheer distances involved would require magical traversal, I explained. So even if you were abducted by space aliens, magic is probably what brought you here. I don't know, he said. My people were to the point of limited space travel, and some were even living in space stations. We were about to get to the point of consumer space travel, so there's been plenty of scientific theories amongst my people regarding how to travel space faster. It's possible that someone beat us to it. We all stared at him once again, this time with our mouths agape. There were so many questions running through my mind all at once. What was space like? How did people... What was space like? How did these people get up to space in the first place? What did they find? Why the hell hadn't he mentioned that before? He noticed our slack jaws. I haven't been to space myself, he explained. There isn't any air up there, so you've got to wear a special airtight suit with tanks of air that feed into it. It has also cost a lot of money to build the vehicles necessary to get there, so they only sent the best and the brightest at first. As more experiments and flights were performed, rich merchants started going to space themselves. As far as I know, they were only able to just barely make it to space. There isn't any air in space, Nash asked. That makes sense, actually. That makes sense, actually, I said. The higher you go up the mountain, the less air there is. I'm assuming that space carts were launched from the tops of mountains. Oh, that monster's fighting back. We call them spaceships, and I don't think so. I know that they launch a bunch of them from a place called Cape Canaveral, which I'm pretty sure is close to sea level, Nick said. I don't think it makes much of a difference. Space is really far up, even compared to the tallest of mountains. What did your people find in space? Renf asked. Well, it's like you said. Everything is really, really far apart. In between the planets and stuff, there's a whole lot of nothing, too. So there wasn't a lot of interest in exploring space outside of specific scientific communities. I do remember seeing some news about plans to mine some asteroids, but I don't know what became of that. What about on the planets? Imla asked. Well, we landed remote-control robots on some of them to explore and see if we could find life, but as far as I know, we didn't find much. People were getting excited about finding water on one of the planets, but other than that, they were pretty barren. I don't think any of them have breathable air either, Nick shrugged. Wait, you said that humans don't have magic, Nash said. How do you make your ships that... How did you make ships that made it to... How did you make... How did you make ships that made it too far into space? How did you make ships that made it that far into the sky? I watched Ren's expression as Nick explained humanity's method of travel via explosive propulsion. I've been shocked to learn of it, but the dwarf was absolutely flabbergasted. It was hard to see Imlaw's expression, but he was obviously paying close attention to what Nick was saying. I chuckled slightly, enjoying the novelty of the conversation. So even without magic, your people can fly like birds? Renf asked. Not really, Nick said. We've got a bunch of different kinds of aircraft, but I'm pretty sure that all of them move much faster than birds do. Plus, most planes carry a bunch of people at once. It's the fastest way to go from one continent to another. That's amazing, the dwarf replied. I had to agree. The more I learned about humans, the more I wanted to know. I desperately wanted to compare our development to their own, but I doubt Nick that Nick would have that kind of information at his age. Plus, there is a certain aspect of human history that he's obviously uncomfortable sharing. I could imagine why. Everyone has darkness in their path they'd like to forget. If kingdoms form a bed of flowers, it's because those flowers are fed with blood. There's something up ahead, Imla called out. What is it? What is it? What is it? I stood to get a better look. It looks like, the gnome paused, a checkpoint. End of chapter. Dum-da-dum. Good morning, Vault. Hope you're doing well. Yeah. Every person has a process to do a thing. If we didn't like the process, we wouldn't do the thing. But yes. So ironically, just as an aside, when I was talking to my voice surgeon, we're talking about what I do. Because, I mean, what I do is not normal by any stretch of the imagination. So he deals with actors, he deals with singers, he deals with professionals of that nature. And then I described what I did, and he's like, that's probably the most strain you could put your voice under, is doing it that way. Human from a dungeon. Because singing, you have a technique for a single song or a singing voice. So if you imagine it like running, you'd have a specific technique for running. That's your singing. And then you have a technique for walking, which is fine. What I'm doing is a decathlon in one race, basically. I thought that was very interesting. Fair enough, Vault. Fair enough. I've got one of your videos coming up. We'll post the link to your Patreon there. Hopefully that'll help some. What chapter is the spiffle on, by the way? Just out of curiosity. Yeah, it does. It does. Well, plus the acid reflux, so that also doesn't help. Look, I mean that's a common problem in voice acting, um, where, well, or even singing, your heavy metal singing with growling and stuff, or what they call a reverse growl, where you growl while inhaling. Those things wreck your voice. You shouldn't be shouting at all. If you want your voice to stay your voice, you should avoid shouting at the best of times. So anything that requires you to shout is going to put a very different type of strain on your voice. That's the sort of thing that can tear a vocal fold, rather than what I've got is vocal strain because of just bouncing around. Yeah. Well, look, if we didn't have this, I'd be using anything but Microsoft Excel. So there is that. The only problem I'm using the Google one is because two people work on the spreadsheet and it's just easier. I don't have to worry about network issues. As long as both of us are connected to the internet, we can both work on the same spreadsheet. So talking in a way that's not natural, that just puts strain on your voice. But shouting specifically, this is a problem with singing that I don't really get, is vocal tearing. So if you tear a vocal fold, you're fucked. It's just nothing I can tell you. There are ways to repair it if you have enough money and you do it quick enough. So you get a tear in your vocal fold, you go into surgery, and they try stitch it up. But your vocal folds are cartilage, so they don't repair. And then the other thing that can happen, especially if you're screaming a lot, is polyps can form, which are hard nodules, which will decrease the flexibility of your vocal folds. So those are the two big problems with screaming. But talking in a slightly different voice doesn't put nearly as much strain in that way. As in, I'm not really risking tearing my vocal cords. I am risking, you're at a higher risk at vocal strain and the muscle problems rather than cartilage problems, if that makes sense. The chickens are doing fine. Still not laying eggs, but I think it's a bit too cold still. We've had a cold front hit. So, but other than that, they're fine. Happy, healthy. They're all adults now. Well, adult-ish, as much as they can be. So, now we just wait with bated breath for them to start laying eggs. Well, yes. But Stephen Hawking was just using typing it, I think. I can't remember how his system works specifically, but I know he had a text system that he used. I do have chickens, lazy comment. So one of the things we wanted to do when we came to Portugal was kind of do some homesteading stuff. Homesteading. As much as city slickers can do homesteading, so we got a decent sized property, renting. And my wife wanted chickens, so we got some chickens. We got 5 egg-laying chickens. Built a little hutch for them, and all of that. Yes, it was eye to speech. I think originally it was like a straw that he used, but as technology advanced, then they could use his eyes. So it wasn't actually him speaking, he was just typing it, and it was text to speech, literally. The first, one of the first. And I think that was also tied into the voice box at some point. Well, I don't know. Because the vocoder there, that I don't know how that works. Because tracheotomy patients use the vocoder as well. Vocoder. Oh, I don't know what it's called. Well, that's not good fault. Hawking will be missed. That works out to a lot more work, Assassin, or Assane. So no narrator does that, because it's just so much extra work. And the way that narrating is structured, you get paid per finished hour. So it doesn't matter how long it takes you to record an hour, then you get paid for the finished product rather than any interim stuff. So recording different character voices at different times means there's different noise in the room at different times, so you have to balance everything. Then you have to cut everything, then you have to edit everything together, and then you have to master it, which can take, I reckon, probably 5, 6, 10 times as long than it should. So narrators just do it as they go. It's not like I'm special, though. I do the same as every other narrator. Well, Redki definitely sounds like an interesting chicken. We've got a non-stick pan, but yeah, basically. We're not quite at cast iron. My wife doesn't like cast iron, and I don't blame her. Oh, it's quite good. I mean, you must understand that we get 12. Just working it out now. 13. Currently, we're at 13 hours of sunlight a day. They get some direct sunlight, but they don't get a lot. But they do get some sunlight. Cheers, Volt. Have a good one. All right, I think we'll move on to the next one. So we're quickly approaching a chapter where I'm going to have to modify the original text. Well, to make a change rather than a thick or a crap. We're going to have to change somebody's name. But I'll try to keep the new name in spirit of the old name, just so that we don't get demonetized. Okay. It sucks? Yes. Yes, it does. But it is what it is. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest... Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of... It's not edition. Brain, it's not working. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Unknown Adventurer Level. Oh, wait, no. Chapter 34. Unknown Adventurer Level NA Unknown. This is boring, my friend complained. Most things are, I replied. We've got nothing better to do, though. Yeah, but I thought this road was supposed to be busy. There hasn't been anyone all day. Your whining will do nothing to change that. Good morning, Alpha Noob. Hope you're doing well. Yes, the name does rhyme with it. As the words left my mouth, the sound of hoofs and wooden wheels in the distance filled my ears. They were still fairly far away, but my friend's face twisted into a smug expression. I sighed, straightened my Balasso guard uniform, and sat in the place that I was supposed to be sitting. My friend leaned on the barricade, their feminine curves fighting desperately against the uniform. Their positioning was obviously intended to bring notice to the aforementioned curves. That doesn't mean anything. It's just a coincidence. Oh, please. You know better than that, they grinned. No, I don't, I said sarcastically. I don't know anything. I'm empty of all forms of knowledge. My friend giggled as the travellers came into view. Two carts pulled by two harnasses carrying quite an interesting bunch. A pair of orcs, a gnome, a dwarf, and something else. Almost like an elf, but with an extremely murky aura. Power, danger, cunning, hunger, sorrow, ambition, and so many other things swirled around its creature. Things. Good morning, Chomper. Hope you're doing well. G'day, mate. Things swirled around its creature. Much appreciated, Chomper. Much appreciated. Hope you're having a good day. Or night. Or anything. The other things. Things were further complicated by the positive emissions, which were just as intense. Innocence, love, kindness, compassion, happiness, and so on. It's not exactly uncommon to feel all of these things at once from someone, but the intensity was an entirely different matter. It spoke of a remarkable capacity for cruelty and heroism, a living contradiction. I glanced over to my friend, who was just as terrified as I was by this thing. It reminded me of the tales that were told of fresh-born to keep them from running off on their own. Horrible monsters that wielded the rough iron and could destroy anything, lurking in the darkest corners, waiting to pounce. I desperately didn't want to interact with this thing, but there might be another... I desperately didn't want to interact with this thing, but there might not be another chance like this. We simply do not have any other choice. I shrugged off my abject terror, took a deep breath, and stood. I picked up my pencil and book, completing my act. "What's this?" the gnome asks. "Taxes." I am, and good luck. Chomper. Taxes within last fiscal year, so this is a toll road now, my friend said. To pass, I'll need taxes. Good morning, James. Hope you're doing well. Taxes within last fiscal year. Taxes within last fiscal year, so this is a toll road now, my friend said. To pass, I'll need to take your names, I added, gesturing with the open book. We will then determine if you must pay the toll. There was a long pause from the group that made my skin crawl. It's not good for us when they start to think about things. I took a long look at them and noticed weapons and signs of fighting. Oh no, they might be adventurers. They're not about to attack us, are they? I gulped down my fear and stood firm. The dwarf was whispering to the bald orc, and the bald orc was whispering back. I could hear what they were saying, but I couldn't understand it. They didn't want me to know what they were saying, and because of this, I couldn't know what they were saying. Such is the nature of things. The weird one said, "My name is..." "How much is the toll?" the bald orc interrupted. I looked at my friend, demonstrating my annoyance to them privately, and then turned back to the group. Well, lazy, stick around and find out. Greetings, ladies. That depends I need your name, please, I answered, with an authoritative tone. My pleasure, Amankira. My pleasure. Thank you for giving me permission. Tone. And what, pray tell, will you be doing with our names if we give them to you? The bald one asked with a grin. So the game begins. It's possible that he's figured it out, but we're well versed in this particular battle of wits. They would have to be crazy to hurl accusations at guards, and that works out well because we're trying to avoid the crazy ones. I'll be writing it down and checking to see if it's already in my other book. If it is, then you'll pay a discounted toll, or even no toll at all. If it's not, then we discuss how much the toll is, I answered, trying my best not to grin. The rest of the group was looking at the bald one with confusion. The gnome looked back at me, and some glint of clarification scrawled across otherwise he's born. The gnome looked back at me, and some glint of clarification scrawled. The gnome looked back at me. There's a glint. Nope. The gnome looked back at me, and some glint of clarification. The gnome looked back at me, and some glint of clarification scrolled across otherwise his boring features. Damn it. May I see the other book that our names may already be in? The bald one asked. For what purpose would you need to see the book other than to attempt to fraud us? I countered. I will not entertain the scoundrel. Now give me your name. I am not a scoundrel. I'm simply curious to why Faye would be collecting taxes for the kingdom of Bolasare. Ah, so he knows that we're Faye. Not necessarily a problem, as he may not yet have guessed our intentions. I heard a sigh come from my friend, and I held out a hand to calm them. The game isn't over yet. Why wouldn't a Fae be collecting taxes? I asked. Have you never seen an employed Fae before? Can't say that I have. And you know how we mortals are. We're suspicious of things that we haven't seen before, he grinned. What use would you even have for our currency? What use would you even have for our currency? What use would you even have for currency? To purchase goods and services, of course. That doesn't the forest provide everything your kind desires? Obviously not, or we wouldn't be here. What sort of things do you buy? I don't need to tell you. All I need is your names, I stated coldly. Still one of the best jokes. And not entirely wrong, James. Just, yes. Greetings. This is an interesting chapter of dodging demonetization. Like Neo from the Matrix. Ladies. Why don't you set our minds at ease by telling us your name first? The bald one asked. Slithering copulation. The orc was familiar with my kind and knew how to play this game. It seemed like an innocent enough request. A name for a name, but he knew damned well what he was doing by asking for ours. The bastard had even praised it in such a way that it would be suspicious if I were to decline. I didn't particularly feel like playing that fool and dancing around the subject, and a quick look at my friend told me that they didn't want to either. Very well, begging it is. Good morning, AJ. Very well, begging it is. Fair enough, I said. We do not have names. We require them, which is why we're asking for yours. Oh, the weird one said, finally catching on. Why would you need our names, though? The orc with the braids asked. Can't you name yourselves? If we could, we would, my friend said. We cannot, and such a beg for... And that is such beg for your kindness. Their feminine form was specifically designed to appeal to mortal sense of lust in a situation like this. Mine was masculine and intended to have the same effect on those with the opposite preference. It's hard to say no to a sexy fae in uniform. Unfortunately, this tactic was lost in the orcs. Their auras did not indicate nearly enough cruelty for them to be wowed by our physical distractions. Dwarf and the gnome, perhaps, but they were both being careful to not even look at us. The only one left is the thing. I stifled a shudder at the thought. Good morning, Alex. Hope you're doing well. In this time unit, whatever it may be for you. If we give you our names, then what will we be called? Baldwin asked, still grinning. I said haltingly. I was surprised. I was surprised. It was a surprising question. I don't know, actually. Probably whatever you want, my friend added. Probably whatever you want, my friend added. That's how it works with you mortals, isn't it? Not quite, the Bald One said. When you take our names, you take our identity and merge it with your own, leaving us without knowledge of who we are. Silence fell amongst us. Fear riddled the auras of the other mortals. My friend and I shared confused glances. Why would they be afraid of not knowing who they are? Aren't mortals only afraid of death or serious injury? Possibly, James. Still to be determined. I like to start a series when it's mostly finished. Or at least has significant chapters. I think Long Way is only on chapter 14? 10? Something like that. Well, yeah. It was difficult getting a bald orc and a not bald orc at the same time. Yeah, well, that's a bit long. Well, it's longer than First Contact. Aren't more... So, I mean, once you've got a fair amount of chapters under your belt, you can say, well, okay, the author's life situation allows them to continuously write this, whether it is as a permanent, like their job is to write the story, or their financial situation is stable enough to write the story. Because the most complicated, or the most common thing with a series is hiatus. Life interrupts what you're doing, and you got to put food on the table, so writing comes second, which I have no problem with. That has to happen. So I like to give it a bit of a chance to breathe, see where it goes, see how people react to it, see if I like it. Because I've read some series where it's like the first 10 chapters are great, and then something happens, and you're like, eh. So I like to give it some time to breathe, like a fine monster. Yeah, I stay away from anything that's... This will likely be the most sexually charged series that I do. And that's just mainly because of one character. In this being sexual. I like to read stories that, one, don't get my channel banned. Two, people can listen to at work. On the radio. Only afraid of death or serious injury. I don't understand. You say that like it's a bad thing. I ventured, but that's how we live. I do not have a name, and therefore don't know who I am. Well, imagine for a moment that you did have a name. Imagine that you know who you are. Your identity impacts the world around you, and you have many tales to tell to those who would listen. Would you willingly part with that? The Bald One asked sagely. Do you feel it's right to take that from someone else? No, I wouldn't willingly part with it. But life is about taking from things around you to further your own existence, I said. You need energy to complete yourselves, so you take the lives of animals, and those animals take the lives of plants for the same purpose. We take your identities for our completion, to further our existence, just as you do. What happens if you don't? The Weird One asked hesitantly. We perish, my friend said. Our story ends, as the season does, if we don't have an identity to anchor us. Ooh, excuse me. That monster is fighting back quite viciously. Yes, we do know this. I have a new name. I have a sense of friendly name that should keep to the spirit of the original name while, you know, not demonetizing the video or channel. So, we'll see how well I do with that name. Those who know. Those who don't will be entertained to anchor us. They get reborn, though, the Bald One explained. Death is temporary to a Fae. That's not exactly pleasant, though, I said. The withering alone is likely much more painful than anything you've ever experienced. Also, our sense of self gets reset. Who we are fades to nothingness, and we die. And we are someone different when we are born. And we are someone different when we are reborn, my friend added. I thought you didn't have a sense of self, the Weird One said. Of course we do. It's what drives us to gain an identity, I explained. Without an identity, we lose our current sense of self to the void. Sure, we're born again, come next season, but we will have different personalities, preferences, and no memory of who we were before. We end up becoming a completely different Fae. Which explains why you would want our names, the Bald One nodded slowly. However, we need our names. There are those who depend upon us. Even if we try to force the issue, they're smart enough to know that they can remove any obstacles we put in their path. Should we let them continue on and just hope someone dumber comes along? Is there a way that we can convince them? Perhaps a bribe or a promise? No, I can feel their determination. This won't work. We'll need to regroup and find another. Wait. All you need are names, right? The Weird One asked. What if we named you? Well, I paused and looked to my friend, who shrugged. Names have power. We should have to sacrifice a large amount of magic to name us, and we would have to be willing to accept the name. For what reason would you not accept the name? The Bald One asked. I looked at my friend again, revealing this could prove dangerous, but they gestured for me to continue. They're right, of course. We're in too deep to hold back now. I sighed and straightened my borrowed uniform nervously. Cheers, Alex. I hope you have a good rest. And also, good morning, Joseph. I seem to have missed you there. I do apologize. Uniform nervous. Borrowed uniform nervously. If you name us, you'll be taking part in our creation, and we'll be forever in your debt. I realize that your kind uses this as a turn of phrase, but we mean it literally. We'll be under your authority for as long as you're able to give us orders, and anything you order us to do, we'll have to do, I explained. So we are left with a conundrum. Which is better, slavery or death? It would just be temporary, my friend giggled. They're mortals, after all. What if I promise not to order you around? The Weird One asked. You can make promises unbreakable, right? The innocence of that question took me off guard. I looked at the strange being as if seeing it for the first time. I had been avoiding looking directly at it, because of the maelstrom, that is its aura. But once I looked past that, I realized that I was looking at a young boy. An odd young boy, whose ears and teeth were wrong, but one who was genuine in its beliefs. My heart melted somewhat as I realized that this innocent youth actually believed that kind of power was possible. It didn't melt enough to keep me from taking full advantage of this mistaken belief, though. I quickly thought of a bluff and a way to make that bluff convincing. It would require a blood pact, but yes, I lied. Okay, the thing said as it leapt from the cart. How do we do that? As the weird one approached me, it suddenly occurred to me that mixing my blood with this thing might be a bad idea. Blood is an odd thing, and mixing of it can lead to some strange happenings. It had been the first thing to leap to mind, though, and now I have to go with it because it would be suspicious. Unless I can think of something. It's simple, I said, trying desperately to think of something to get me out of this. In your own words, express your promise and consequences of not adhering to it. Then, if I agree to your promise, we cut our palms and clasp hands. Our blood will mingle, and the promise will become binding. Good morning, Wine Sagittarius. Hope you're doing well. Promise will become binding. And then I can name you. We can be on our way. And then I can name you, and we can be on our way, it said happily. Got it. It stood before me, and we met each other's gaze as it thought of what to say. The dark blue of its glimmering eyes reminded me of the shining stones that the fairies loved to steal from wandering merchants. Inside this deep blue was a hint of green, which was reminiscent of the grove in which I would be reborn. Which was reminiscent of the grove I had been reborn. Inside wandering merchants. Inside this deep blue was a hint of green, which is reminiscent of the grove in which I'd been reborn. The eyes of mortals are such beautiful things. I can definitely see why the hags collect them. I hereby promise that I'll not intentionally force a fate to perform any action against their will by enforcing their debt to me. May I die if I break this promise. I went over the sentence in my mind to make sure it hadn't performed any trickery with its words. The promise wouldn't be binding, but I still had to call out any trickery to make sure it believed the performance. Using the word intentional made certain that if I accidentally enforced the debt, it could simply apologize, and it made sure to clarify that enforcing the debt would be a breach of promise. So if it came to odds with Faye, it still had recourse. The consequence was rather mundane, but it served the purpose of ensuring that it couldn't become our master. The thing would only be able to give one order. Clever. Unfortunately, I still hadn't thought of a way of mangling up that principle. Unfortunately, I still hadn't thought of a way out of mingling our blood, but I decided that I liked this little weird child. What's the worst that could happen if we mix blood? I smiled and gave a nod of assent. Then I hardened the nail of my left forefinger into a sharp edge and sliced my right palm deep enough for blood to flow. The weird one offered its hand, and I made a similar cut on the offered palm. I held my hand up with my fingers spread apart as the weird one extended its hand forward. It looked at me. It looked at my hand and back to its own as I looked at its hand and back to my own. Our eyes met again, and I raised my eyebrow, wondering what it was doing. Its lips disappeared as it made an awkward expression, and it finally clasped a hand with mine. I froze as our blood mingled and a shock ran through my form. A light began to flash before my eyes. End of chapter. Monster. Hydration. Coffee. The trifecta of a good narrator. Oh wait, I didn't share the Twitch. Copy. Oh, do that. And pin. Forgot to do that. For those interested, there's the Twitch channel. Off-platform alternate channel. Oop, no, that's not what I wanted. No, right, let's do that. I'm going to step away for a brief moment. I shall be right back. I shall leave you with random royalty-free music and a chair. Don't look behind you. Someone's following. And back. Cheers, Zane. Hope you have a good one. Thank you for popping past. It's very much appreciated. Good morning, Adderworks. Hope you're doing well. I'm actually have been contemplating redoing Billy Bob. It was one of the first series I did for HFY. As to my ever-increasing goals of updating old content, I think Billy Bob definitely needs an update. But that's not a today thing. Billy Bob is chaos incarnate, which is awesome. All right, let's head into this story. Chapter number 3. Number 3 with the chapter number 3 for today, with the very bad no-no word. The very bad no-no word. What a life. Anyway, greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Human from a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 35. Unknown Adventurer Level NA. Unknown. Ooh, monsters fighting back. Yeah, well, I mean, when I recorded that, I was on my first microphone, which was trash microphone. It was a $10 microphone, literally. So it was absolute hot garbage. Fair enough. I think at this time, he's probably never coming back. Although, I've thought that about other series, and they've come back eventually. Welcome to all the new people. Hope you're all doing well, or as well as can be. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Interact with the chat, or lurk. All equally viable options. Unknown Adventurer Level NA. Glimpses of memory poured through me. Structures of glass, stone, and steel that rose to the clouds, a testament to extreme levels of effort and coordination. Children laughing and playing amongst carefully cultivated nature without a care in the world. Video games, homework, martial arts lessons, stretches of ground covered with sticky black substance that gets really hot in the summertime. Burnt feet, skinned knees, dirty pants. The mingled smells of fresh cooked carcass and various vegetables crafted into a hamburger. Poor, kind plants skinned, sliced, and shredded, but turned into a delightful snack. The feeling of entering a warm home in a cold winter's day. A world devoid of magic or my kind, but still beautiful in a haunting way. There were other memories, too. A beautiful girl with golden hair, wasting away from illness. A stern but kind father and a loving mother. Childhood friends and enemies, maturing over time. Good morning, Liam. Hope you're doing well. It's coffee, not tea. I'm not really a big tea person. A cold darkness with a dulled sensation of flesh being carved and stitched back together. Pain. Healing. A dissonant whisper within the dark, urging something incomprehensible. More pain. Much more pain. Only bearable because mind doesn't notice it. A long stretch of sleep. More whispers. More intelligible, eh? More whispers. More whispers, but intelligible. More healing. Orcs. An unbidden tear rolled down my cheek as I realized the thing before me was Nicodemus, Liam Smith, a human far from home, with a false mind entangled within his own, who dearly wishes to return. The orcs in the cart are his adopted brothers, who are trying to help him get back. A marvelous tragedy. No wonder he's been so closely watched by, That will be all, Nick, I said, trying not to finish that thought. Yeah, Nick replied, releasing my hand. Tears openly rolled down his cheeks as well. I'm sorry. I didn't know that would happen. I know. Don't worry, I forgive you. You have a beautiful home. He smiled at me, wiping his eyes. As do you. What now? You mean now that you know, I trailed off, that the blood pack is bullcrap? He chuckled. Yeah. Well, I've seen your memories. I know that you won't betray your promise with a good reason. I've seen your memories. I know that you won't betray your promise without good reason. I only ask that you explain that reason if the time comes. So we're doing this, my friend asked, strolling up next to me. Nick has my consent, I said, finally wiping my tear. Yours? Of course. You're the one who cares about your precious freedom. You're the... There were a lot of weird ones back in the day. I think Royal Road has become a lot more homogenous than it was 5 years ago. You know, the same tropes over and over again, rather than, like, new interesting stuff. Yours? Of course. You're the one who cares about precious freedom. I don't care about whether or not it bosses me around for a few decades. I just want to keep being me. I nodded at Nick, who returned the gesture and began to think. I waited nervously, wondering what name would become mine, and if he would even be powerful enough to pull it off. He's got a lot of magic, but I don't actually know how much is needed. Hurry up, will you? My friend demanded. Sorry, it's hard to come up with names on the spot like this, Nick said. Do you have any, I don't know, preferences? I'm fine with anything that isn't Tinkerbell Titania. I'm fine. I'm fine with anything that isn't Tinkerbell Titania, Puck or Oberon, I laughed. Nick chuckled as my friend tapped her chin. What's the mortal word for breasts, like... What's the mortal word for breasts that I like? Boobs? Nick asked. Nope. Jugs? Nope. That holds water. That holds water. Jugs? Jogs? No, that holds water. Bust. Not even close. Okay, so this is... I hate YouTube with this particular thing, because it's funny. It's funny. It says tits. Tits is funny. Maybe if I just quickly say it, the YouTube algorithm won't detect it. Because the name I was thinking of was Boingers. You know, it fits the aesthetic of the story. It fits the personality of the Fae. And it should be confusing enough to any algorithm. Maybe I'll just mumble the name. Not even close. Shadow, I wish I knew what was allowed. Tartars. I like tartars. Teats sounds a bit... It doesn't go with the character either. I have no idea, Lazy. Not even close. It, I interjected with an exaggerated sigh. Yes, my friend shouted, jumping with glee. That's what I want my name to be, Nick. The human smile faded to a look of shock. He looked at me as if to ask if my friend was joking. I slowly shook my head and shrugged. He looked back towards my friend and gathered himself. Really? He asked. You serious? Never a day in my life, but I do want to be called this. Nah. I do want to be called Boingers. Good morning, Marcus. I do want to be called Tartars, my friend said with an impish grin. It represents... It's representative of a mother's love and nurturing nature, while also being lewd and inappropriate. What's not to love? All right, well, I name you Tartars, I guess, he said, as the air was forced from his lungs. My friend began to glow, and I immediately recognized him as Tartars, a friend from the deep wild forest. Chi-Chis could work as well. I think we'll go with Tartars. It's short enough that it doesn't change the timing much of sentences. Forest. From a narrating point of view. Wild forest. And it's easier to remember, because I see the T when I'm like half reading ahead. From the deep wild forest. But something was wrong. Tartarus' aura was glowing brighter than it should. Playfulness, glee, joy, guile, and all the other emissions were joined by another authority. Tartarus was no longer simply a fae. They were now an arch-fae, and my eyes bulged at the realizations. I glanced back at Nick, who was holding his knees, trying to get his breath back. Tartarus grabbed my hand and jumped up and down. It worked, they shouted. It worked, they shouted with glee. I'm Tartarus now. Not a problem, Post. Not a problem. I understand your pain. Been there, done that. Thankfully not today. For me. As now. You're an archfey now, I said coldly. An archfey named Tartars. Mamulbaron, Dobran. Mamuldabran. Mamuldabran? Mamuldabran is going to have a conniption. Are you all right, Nick? The orc with the braids, Nash, called from the cart. Yeah, Nick shouted back. Just took the wind out of me. Tartars grabbed Nick's hand next, jumping up and down in excitement. I noticed that they put some extra jiggle into the fleshy bits, too. Thank you, Nick. Thank you so much. If you ever need anything from me, feel free to ask, and I mean anything, Tartar said with a wink. Might as well give up on that offer, I interrupted. Nick won't bend to temptation. How do you know? Tartars asked. I've been very persuasive. I'll tell you later. Psh, fine, your turn. What's a good name for you? A creeping realization hit me. If Nick names me, there's a chance that I may become an archfey as well. The fae will flock around me while laughing and playing, but the forest will demand my guidance. Will it come naturally? Will I have to work at it? Will I be a kind and just leader who is much beloved? Will I be an abuse? Will I be an abusive tyrant, twisted by power into something unrecognizable by my current self? Or worst of all, will I be incompetent buffoon who destroys our home? I don't know, I said after a few moments. I don't know either, Nick said. I don't know. I don't know, I said after a few moments. I don't know either, Nick said. I couldn't understand the speech in most of your memories. The sounds were pretty, but when I tried to say them, they won't come out. Of course, sweetie. Ba 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 ba. Of course, sweetie, Tartar said. Mortals cannot speak fae. Wait, Nick comes from another world, but I was able to understand what his people in his memories were saying, I added. Even the ones who weren't, people. Careful. Careful, there are some things that are less better. Careful, there are some things that are best left unaddressed, Tartar said. The reason you could understand the words in Nick's memories is because of the gift of the gab, granted to us by one of those things that are best left unaddressed. The only words we can't understand are those that aren't supposed to be understood. Nick and I were taken aback by Tartar's sudden change in demeanor. They'd gone from nearly spirit-like to serious and intellectual in the blink of an eye. Housestairs caused Tartar to grin widely, though. You know what I know once Nick names you. You got another one in you, right, Nick? Tartar's asked. Yeah, that took less than half my magic, Nick smiled. I'm good to give another name. Question is, what should it be? Well, definitely not a name based on sectionized mortal appendages, if you don't mind. I shook my head. Something intelligent would be nice. Shouldn't be a commonly... Shouldn't be a commonly used proper name, though, Tartars added. Something as unique as possible. Smart and unique. Nick rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Maybe something to do with math, algebra, calculus, calculator, abacus. Oh, a bacon. Sounds a bit... Wait. How is that spelled? I asked. A-B-A-C-O-N, I think. A bacon? Really? Oh. Oh. Sounds a bit... Wait. A bacon? Really? A bacon? Really? Uh-oh. Where? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Ah. Uh-oh, Tartars interrupted. I think you've made them ever-cross. That's so stupid. Yes, I am infantile. My humor is juvenile. Go suck off a wagon, I replied, incensed by the pun. Hey now, don't be abercrass. You see, I said to Nick, you can't name me that. You'll be dooming me to an eternity of torture via wordplay. Okay. Nick held up his hand defensively. What about Algebron? Tartar and I looked at each other. I could tell that they were desperately trying to think of a pun, and I grinned evilly when their face revealed an expression of utter disappointment. Yes, I think that'll do nicely, I nodded. All right, I hereby name you Algebron. His voice faded, and my eyes were clouded by the cloud. His voice faded, as my eyes were clouded by the glow coming from my form. Pure, raw power coursed through me like lightning, striking over and over again. Time halted, and I was suddenly free from my form entirely. It was now little more than a puppet, and I was now its puppeteer. I could feel the forest in ways I never had dreamed possible. I instinctively knew that I was now charged with maintaining it, and doing everything I could to properly raise Fae and the fair folk who thrived within it. I now knew all of their little plans, pranks, and plots, and they laughed at how futile they were. Along with this duty came knowledge. I knew that if I had somehow obtained this knowledge without the power that came with it, I would have been made insane, a blabbering fool, doomed to wander the lands, desperately trying to warn others of what's to come. But with this power, I had become more than a pawn in the game. I was now a player, and I could prevent what's to come. I can now save everyone and everything that I hold dear. I gazed at Nick, still frozen in the act of doubling over from the recoil from the spell he didn't even realize he cast. Magic that exists outside the Cure God. I saw the chains of debt connecting... I saw the chains of debt connecting Tartars and I to him, but even so, his existence was still a mystery to me. It shouldn't be, but the High Ones were guarding him like a child guards a precious toy. They hid him away from prying eyes that would use him to further their own devices. When one considers the fallibility of mortal memory, I likely know this boy better than he knows himself. I know that he considers his favorite food to be spaghetti his mother makes every other Saturday, but it's actually the hash browns and eggs his father crafts daily. I know that he loves lizards and is irrationally afraid of bugs. I know that he loves lizards and is irrationally afraid of bugs that look like leaves. I know that his most embarrassing moment is when he didn't make it to the toilet in time in first grade and had to be sent home after soiling himself. But I don't know his fate. I looked at the orcs and couldn't tell theirs either. The three altar boys had fully intertwined their futures, and because of Nick, those futures were now uncertain. The dwarf and the gnome had somewhat uncertain fates, but they were far less intertwined. I was able to divine what could happen to them. I felt something akin to a warmth from Tartars, who was in a form similar to mine own. Who was in a form similar to my own. Their happiness contrasted perfectly with my grim concerns. I informed them of how blessed they are to be able to be gleeful in the face of what we know. in the face. I informed them of how blessed they are to be able to be gleeful in the face of what we now know. They informed me that what we now know doesn't have a face, and I couldn't help but laugh. We embraced, our energies mingling and tickling and charging each other up. We now have eternity to ourselves. We'd been partners from the moment of our rebirth, and now not even the seasons themselves could separate us. Together, we would guide our forest forevermore. I turned my attention back towards Nick, and time resumed its march. And time resumed its march. "Are you all right, Nick?" Tartar's puppet asked. "Yeah," the boy replied. "I'm gonna need a nap, I think." It would... "Have a nap in the cart, where are you?" I made my puppet say. "There are many things in this area that wouldn't hesitate to take advantage of sleeping meat." "Of course. Did it work? Is your name Algebron?" he asked. "Yes, I am Algebron, Archfey of the Deep Wild Forest," I answered. "Pleasure to meet you." "Wait, you're different now?" "Yes. It's growth like how you are now different than yourself as a babe." "Same as you, Tartars?" "Of course. Before you named me, I couldn't do this," Tartars said, as their forms' breasts grew noticeably larger, stretching the limits of the uniform adorning them. I chuckled as Nick blushed at the sight, turning his head so that he didn't stare. Even though his heart belonged to another, the incessant urge to procreate is strong in most mortals his age. Knowing him as I do, he'll continue to fight the temptations, no matter the form they arrive in. I find this worthy of respect, but I suspect that Tartars finds it a bit frustrating. "So," he paused to collect himself, "what will you two do now?" "We'll return to our home." We'll return to our home. We now have duties to tend to," I explained. "I'm going to play so many pranks," Tartar said. "What kind of duties?" Nix asked. "We are charged with the growth and maintenance of the Deep Wild Forest. We will teach the Fae within to care for the plants and animals that make the forest what it is," I said with a smile. "And we will defend the forest if need be." "So you're like the king and queen of the Fae?" "Nope. More like Mommy and Daddy, and we've just got lots of babies to take care of," Tartar said. "Do you want to be one of my babies? I'll let you nurse from—" "Enough," I interrupted. "You'll not be swayed, Tartars." Nick gave me a look of gratitude as Tartars frowned. Their breasts shrank back to their earlier size, and they crossed their arms to indicate displeasure. I sighed at the sulky display. Eternity is going to be an interesting. Eternity is going to be interesting, at least. "One last question before you go, if you don't mind," Nick said. "Who is that person you mentioned before? Mum something. Mummy Bran?" Tartars and I looked at each other for a moment before laughing gleefully at Nick's... Tartars and I looked at each other for a moment before laughing gleefully at Nick's butchering of Mummaldebran. Of Mummaldebran's name. Miss rounded a little to ease our laughter. After a few moments, I took a deep breath and composed myself. Mummaldebran is a sort of a patron of the Fae. Normally it decides who is and isn't worthy of becoming an Archfey, I answered, wiping tears of laughter from my eyes. "Will they be mad that I made you two Archfey?" Nick asked, with fear in his tone. "Probably not," I assured him. Mummaldebran isn't particularly invested in the growth of the Fae. It's more of a judge of character than anything. As a judge of character, it'll likely be displeased at Tartar's ascension, but it probably won't blame you for that." "Okay, I'm glad." "We should go," Tartar said. "We need to tend to our home, and they need to return to their journey." "I agree," I said. "I'm grateful for the gift, Nick. If you're ever in the need, just seek us out. If you're ever in need, seek us out. You know where to find us." "Okay. It was good meeting you two," the boy said with a warm smile. "Good to meet you as well," Tartars and I said simultaneously. Nick's companions watched us as he went back to the carts. With a wave of my hand, I rid the road of our illusory I rid the road of our illusory checkpoint. Tartars and I stood to the side as the mortals drove past, waving to them as they went. They waved back with varying levels of enthusiasm. York gave a strong and glad wave. He had been watching our exchange with the utmost scrutiny, and I couldn't help but wonder what he made of it all. Nash was much more muted in the way that he waved, likely because he wisely didn't trust us. The gnome and the dwarf waved politely, and Nick waved excitedly. I hope they find a way to take him home. End of chapter. Here we go. We've done the infamous Tartars, Boingers, Boobs, and all the other Greetings, Right Brain Affairs. How are you doing today? Knockers? Knockers could work. Well, YouTube loves screaming to the, well, everyone. That sort of contour, that sort of thing, right brain? Oop, what am I doing? There we go. Oh, I'm glad to hear that, right brain. I'm glad to hear that. That's fair enough, fair enough. I suppose it's better than Twitch. Twitch screams and shouts and plays music and stuff. Oh, that makes it a bit worse. Spreadsheet of doom done. Added sound effects. It sounds quite amusing, lazy. All right. We're slowly approaching the 2-hour mark, but I think I only got 4 hours sleep last night, so my concentration isn't as good as it should be, and my voice isn't as great as it should be. But at least we managed to finish off the Human from a Dungeon. I think I'm going to call it for the day. I do apologize for the short stream. I will be back tomorrow. Every day. Well, 6 days a week. Thank you for spending your time with me. It is very much appreciated. And I hope to see you all tomorrow. Yeah, that's true. I've also got links turned off on YouTube, so it shouldn't work. All right. See you all tomorrow. Have a good one. Cheers.